Welcome to JonGetsGames. Today I'm going to do a gameplay run-through for Shadow Throne, which is currently on Kickstarter. Afterwards, I'll briefly describe what I find most interesting about this game. Shadow Throne is a drafting and hand management card game consisting of a deck of cards, some tokens, and a single board which is used to track the strength values of the three factions as the game progresses. Before I go into gameplay, I'd like to mention that this is a prototype version of the game. Some of the art is almost complete, while some of the art is still very much in flux, and many of the tokens will get much thicker and nicer. The first thing that I'd like to talk about in this game is the cards themselves. So here we have a peasant who is fighting for the red faction cause. We can see that he is a commoner. There are three ranks: commoner, elite, and nobles. The top left banner shows the strength value of this card, so this peasant will add 1 strength to the red faction cause for all players. The triangle shows the victory points that the person who played this card into the conflict will receive should this red faction win the conflict at the end of the turn. The coin shows the cost to play this card into the conflict, so this guy happens to be free, and this white banner down here is a consolation prize, so should the red faction not win the conflict, then the person who played this card is going to get 3 gold back from the bank for hedging their bets. The bottom here is an area for special action text. This card happens to not have any, but many cards in the game do. A turn is split up into 3 overall phases. The first phase is drafting. On a prior turn, you will have discarded down to a single card in your hand, and now we need to build our hand back up to 7 cards. Each player is dealt 6 cards, from which they're going to draft a single card into their hand. They're going to give the remaining 5 cards to the person on their left. They're going to receive 5 cards from the person on their right, choose 1, give 4 to the left, receive 4 from the right, and they're going to keep doing this until they've selected 6 new cards, giving themselves a hand of 7 cards. At this point, they're going to start the conflict part of the game, which is where players are going to be playing cards out onto the board. Simultaneously, each player is going to select a single card from their hand, put it face down. Once everyone has decided on a card, they all flip them over. I have a pretend 3-player game going right here, and each person now has to pay the gold cost for the card they just flipped, so this card would cost me 1 gold. At this point, we would modify the strength board depending on the cards that were played. So we see that this player played a 4 value for the red faction. We see that I played a 3 strength value for the blue faction. And we see that the person to my right played a 1 strength value for the yellow faction. At this point, each player would go back to their hand and they would select a new card, and we're going to do this 4 times total. One thing I'd like to mention, if you ever want to play 2 cards in a row of the same color, you're going to pay a 1 gold penalty in order to do this. So just keep that in mind. So now, using the powers of video editing, we now get to jump forward and see what it looks like after 4 full rounds of conflict have resolved. At this point, we shift into the third phase of a turn, which is resolution, and see what everyone gets. We pull over the faction strength tracker and we see that blue ended up winning this turn, just barely edging out red, and yellow just did not have a very good showing this turn. That's fine though, because all these tokens are going to reset back to 0 for the beginning of the next turn. Let's see what everyone got. The person to my left is going to get no victory points because they played no blue cards. However, this card right here is going to give them 3 consolation gold because yellow did not win the conflict. The person to my right went pretty hard on blue at the very end. In fact, this card has a +1 strength modifier because of a card I played in the second to last round, which gave a +1 modifier to all blue cards in that final round. So the person to my right is going to get 1, 2, 3 victory points, and they still get the 3 consolation gold for that yellow card because yellow didn't win the conflict. They made out really well in the token department. I got the most victory points, however, because between these 2 blue cards, I have 4 victory points. I don't get any consolation gold because the only card I played with that happened to be blue, and blue won the conflict. At this point, if any one player had 15 or more victory points, the game would be over. Before I shift over and talk about what I think makes this game interesting, I'd like to talk about the thematic and mechanical differences between the 3 decks that come with this game. So to start, we have the blue deck here, which are the rebellious villagers essentially going against the kingdom. Their cards mechanically tend to buff each other, so blues make blues better and they get to drop these little +1 strength tokens down. The yellow deck is the church, and they're all about converting other colored cards to the yellow cause. So this card right here converts all commoners of the current wave to yellow, so you drop these tokens on other cards to make them yellow. Red is the kingdom itself, and their theme is all about killing other cards. So if we look on this card out here, it says, kill all nobles of other factions in this wave. So you drop little skull tokens on those applicable cards. Those cards don't apply any strength to that faction, and they get half of the victory points rounded down. What I find most interesting about this game is how the drafting phase and the hand-playing phase work into and off of each other. It's interesting in the drafting phase, making sure you give yourself something that is solid but also flexible to play out for the conflict phase. You know, you might want to have a plan like, okay, I'm going to go heavy on red, but you also want to make sure that if red is just not getting much support from other players, you can maybe squeeze a couple victory points or a bunch of gold out of the other cards in your hand. The game tends to last 4 to 5 turns total, so you don't want to have a dead turn. So in general, if you can see it's just not going your way on a given turn, then oftentimes you just want to shift gears, make a lot of money, and then just try and spend it all in the following turn. For instance, we have a little combo here, which I actually played out in one of the playtest games with the designer and won with. And you play the king, and he says you can play another character who is red from your hand, effectively letting you play 5 cards that conflict round. I dropped this 6 strength guy. That's 7 victory points total, as well as 6 strength. I ended up winning by exactly 15 points. I had exactly 0 money in my bank, and it was really tight. You know, that last card that was dealt to me that I had no choice about in the drafting phase gave me the single income that got me to the 8 gold that let me pull this whole thing off, and I was sweating through the drafting phase, really hoping I'd be able to get to it, and I did, and I pulled it off, and I played it. It was really fun, and there's all sorts of moments like that in this game where you're either working to try and win this turn or squeeze some victory points this turn, or you say, you know what, this turn isn't going to be great, let's get lots of gold, let's work to the next turn. You always feel like you have something you're working towards, and there's some great variety among the cards, so you feel like you can pull off really neat combos and surprise people, and just, I don't know, I've really enjoyed myself playing this game through the playtesting process. I hope you've enjoyed my gameplay run through for the game. If you found it interesting, please consider backing it on Kickstarter.